Week 2 deals with understanding cost behavior and then applying that cost behavior to a model called cost volume profit analysis. So let's first talk about cost behavior. When we think about cost behavior in this course, we're going to think about it in two dimensions, either a fixed cost or a variable cost. And essentially what this is a study of how specific costs respond to changes in level of business activity. That is, do they increase, do they decrease, or do they remain constant? And so what we, in our model, cost will do one of three things. So if it remains constant, then we're going to call that a fixed cost. If it increases or decreases with level of activity, we'll call that a variable cost. And why this is important is that as managers of organizations, we need to know how our costs are going to behave based on changes in levels of activity, because it's important for us to be able to have a handle on our overall financial situation as activity levels either go up or down. And the other key thing to keep in mind is that cost behavior applies to all types of organizations. It certainly applies to healthcare, it applies to for-profit, nonprofit, manufacturing, service, and other types of companies. So when we think about activity levels, it can be a variety of things depending on the organization. In a retail company, it could be sales. In a hospital, it could be number of patients that come in. Trucking companies could be miles, hotels, occupancy, etc. So, and what we'll find later is that many companies can and often do use more than one measurement base. When we pick our activity basis, what we're really looking for is some cause and effect relationship. That is, we're looking for the activity that actually causes cost to either go up or down. So that's why that different organizations really have to assess what is the best cause and effect or causal relationship between their variable cost and the activity. So let's first look at variable cost. Variable costs are those costs that change in direct relation to activity level. That's in total. So if the activity level goes up by 10%, the total variable cost will increase by 10%. And if it goes down by 25%, then the total variable cost will go down by 25%. With that said, on a per unit basis, it remains constant at every level of activity for our model. So think about a simple model where somebody opens a store and they're going to sell one product, and we'll call this a health drink. And let's say hypothetically that the health drink is purchased from a manufacturing company that specializes in health drinks. So this company, which operates on Boylston Street, buys their bottle of health drink for $1 per bottle. So what will happen is that for every bottle that they sell, their variable cost will increase by $1. So if they sell one bottle, their variable cost, their cost of buying that material is $1. If they sell 100 bottles, then their variable cost is 100. And so what you can see is that as the level of activity goes up, the total variable cost goes up, but the per unit variable cost remains constant. So here's a simple example. The Damon Manufacturing Company manufactures radios that contain a $10 digital clock. So a digital clock inside a radio would be considered a raw material or direct material. So in this particular case, the company has chosen the number of units that it produces as the activity index. So for each radio produced, the total cost of clocks or the total direct material increases by $10. So if 2,000 radios are produced, then the total direct materials or variable cost are 20,000. If 10,000 are produced, then it goes to 100,000. So you see that the cost per unit remains constant, but the total variable cost increases in direct relation to the activity level. And this is how it looks graphically. So here on the left-hand side is the total variable cost increasing in direct relation to the level of activity. And on the right-hand side is the graph that shows the per unit variable cost, which remains constant at $10. Okay, so this is how we'll always view variable cost. in our model and in this course. So the other type of cost that we'll concern ourselves with in this course and for our cost volume profit model is something called fixed cost. Fixed cost remains constant over the relevant range or the activity level. Now, we can also think about it on a per unit basis, and it would vary inversely with activity. So let me just give a simple example. So we've started that store on Boylston Street to sell health drinks. And we'll say hypothetically that our cost to be in business as the rent, and we'll say that's $2,000 a month. And we have one person and we pay him or her, let's say $5,000 per month as the store manager. So those costs are going to be in place whether we sell one drink or we sell 10,000 drinks. So we consider those costs to be fixed or not changing as a result of the changes in activity level. So if I add those two together on a monthly basis, I'm going to spend $7,000, $2,000 for rent, $5,000 for salary, and that's going to remain constant irrespective of how many units or how many soft or health drinks that I sell. So we could also say that on a per unit basis, fixed cost is inversely related because as I sell more, if I simply divide the number of units sold by the fixed cost, you'll see that it will go down with every unit I sell. So examples of fixed costs could be insurance, rent, salaries of employees, etc. It's basically those costs that don't change or vary with the level of activity that we have in our operation. So in this case, they talk about one dimension of fixed cost, which is the lease cost of $10,000 per month. So Damon leases a facility, they pay $10,000 per month. That does not change with level of activity. And you can see that the calculation is if they sell 2,000 radios, then the fixed cost per unit is $5. If they sell 10,000, the fixed cost per unit is $1. So just as an FYI, when we talk about leverage, one of the important things for companies that have a lot of fixed cost is this idea of leveraging their fixed cost by utilizing it by having lots of activity. Right? So you think about a movie theater, you think about a hospital, think about a university, and really they build a large infrastructure which is primarily fixed cost, constant cost, and the only way that they can leverage that is to utilize it by having activity, by having patients, students, or other customers. So this is what the fixed cost curves look like. So on the left-hand side is the total fixed cost. So you can see here's the activity level, here's the cost, and here it is constant over the activity level. And then here it is inversely related to level of activity. So the higher the level of activity, the lower the fixed cost per unit. And if you were to compare this back to the variable cost, the left-hand total cost curve was linear in nature, and the variable cost per unit was constant. So the other thing to keep in mind is you'll hear the term relevant range as you watch the videos and or read the materials. And all relevant range refers to is the planned level of activity. So I build a movie theater, and my planned level of activity, the other seats that I have and the number of movies I can show. If I build a hospital, it's what I can accommodate in terms of the number of patients who I can service. So my relevant range may change if I make a major strategic decision. So if I build a wing onto my hospital, or if I add additional seats into my movie theater, then my relevant range would change. But for our purposes, we're going to assume that the relevant range remains constant, which means that our fixed cost will remain constant by and large. So the other thing that's mentioned in the readings and in the videos is this idea of mixed cost. We're not going to utilize mixed cost in the graded assignment or in the discussion board. All mixed cost is a combination of fixed and variable costs. So there are some things that have a combination of both. And for example, heat, light, and power in a building most buildings will leave the heat, light, and power on 365 days a year. And so there's a certain base that of cost that they incur. And as people utilize it, then there's a portion that increases. So there's this mixed cost concept. We really don't need to cover it in this course. So I just want to point it out because you'll see it in the readings, and but we're essentially going to ignore it. Ignore it is essentially irrelevant to our discussions. The other thing we're going to ignore is the whole discussion around forecasting tools, high-low method, regression analysis, etc. We're not in a 10-week course. We don't have the time to explore that aspect around forecasting costs. So we're just going to ignore that as well.